The biggest stumbling block to Christianity is Christians. Why do I say this? The idea of Christianity is that we have all fallen to sin. We are all slaves to our desires. We are all subject to sin. But Christ comes, renews our spirit, makes us righteous before God, and saves our soul. If this was truly true, then a person who was living like a Christian, no, a person who is living their life before Christianity and a person who is living life after Christianity should be different. Yet, do we see that? We see scandal after scandal after scandal of so called Christians who claim to be following Christ, who claim to love Him, who claim to keep His commandments, believe, true believers in many people's eyes, fail to live up to the standards that Christ has. What does this mean? It either means the standards are too high. It means that God is unjust because God he made laws that humans can't follow and expects us to follow him. Or it means that humans aren't truly following God. Because if Christ came to fulfill the law and you are a follower of Christ, you should be able to keep the law. There shouldn't be any scandals or crazy things that happen unless you are truly an antichrist. Yet people say that it's a common thing to fall into sin for Christians. It's a common thing to trap and continue Christians continually sin and sin and sin. This is more of a problem for Protestant Christians. And the only reason why I say this is a problem for Protestant Christians is because Catholics have a concept, Catholics and Orthodox have a concept of confession and examination of conscience, understanding your sins and confessing to the priest, confessing to God your sins. Protestant Christians have no such process. They do not examine their conscience. They say they confess to God, but do you really see a Protestant Christian reflect on their sins, reflect on their faults, and reflect on their sins, name their sins, and ask God for forgiveness? Specifically naming their sins and asking God for forgiveness. Definitely not. They do not do an examination of conscience. I have met very few Protestant Christians who've done examinations of consciousness. But that's not besides the point. If you want a Christian law to be established on this earth, in however imperfectly, the Christian law has to be followed. So you can't be saying like we're gonna ban sexual practices or ban do all these bans on whatever these sex practices that people consider are considered degenerate if you yourself aren't following the sexual standards that God it has established and enmeshed in Christian society. You can't demand a punishment of death for sodomy if you can't even do if you can't even obey the sin that says you can't watch porn or you can't masturbate or anything. Because if you're demanding perfection from another group who's different from you must be perfect yourself. So I say this because so the biggest reason why things like gay marriage and same-sex marriage and this whole social controversial movements that are coming out, but they may have their place, whether they're just or unjust. That's not the point of the video. The reason why they are here in the first place is because the Christian churches lost their legitimacy in demanding sexual morality. When you see a pastor screw a kid or you see like a a a a, a priest do homosexual rape on um an underage boy or something like that. There's no way. And then furthermore, the church doesn't punish it sufficiently and it becomes a scandal. You've completely abdicated your responsibility to demand society follow the dictates of your law. So because you cannot follow your law, you bring scandal and you allow further sin to come into the world because of that. If you think that Christian law should be implemented, then you should at least follow Christian law. I struggle with things related to Christian law as well, but I do not claim to demand Christian law be enforced in my country because I know I can't live up to it. I would be condemned as much as everyone else. And if your law is so widespread that no one can follow it but Christ, that means it's either a fluke or it's fundamentally unable to be followed by normal human beings. Even Jewish law is considered able to be followed by most Jews. To be a good Jew, all you have to do is follow the law and obey the commandments. Another thing about Christian law. Christian law claims to be able to be followed. Christian law, Jesus was supposed to be the example for all Christians. But I don't think there's a single example in the synoptic gospels that Jesus was tempted with sexual sin. Maybe because the same sexual sins are much different in the modern era than then. But if you don't have the idea that if Jesus truly was what suffered all the temptations that we suffer, then there would have had to be some description. And I know in the Bible they say if there were books written about there's unlimited things that can be written about Christ, and it wouldn't be able to be filled with all of the dictionaries in the world and all of the libraries in the world. But at the same time, if sexual sin is something that most people struggle with, it's like the smoking of sins, then who can be our example of a person who survived and completely defeated sexual sin? Because most people who claim to beat sexual sin either hide it or push it underground or do something with it and create further scandals by saying they defeated it, yet they didn't defeat it. So if the biggest stumbling block for implementing Christian law, for making sure that the state in, encourages Christianity, is Christians themselves, because they have a law that they cannot follow. So that's all I wanted to discuss today. Um, I hope this helps, and I do not mean to sound blasphemous or like or anti-Christian at all, but it's something that Christians need to understand. I believe in God. I believe Christ died for me. But it's something I've been wrestling with, and I hope someone can find an answer. I hope a priest, a pastor could at least explain these finer aspects of Christian culture. Thank you.